Welcome to We Learn Network. This is session 8, part 2 of data storage management on the file system. In this session, we are going to cover topics of file system, construct and function, superblock, the namespace, metadata and attributes, access permission, interface semantics, locking, file system buffer and the cache, file system checking and generalizing, that is journaling, scaling file system, network file system client, remote mounting the network file system, and file server system. As in previous session, we have already discussing about the allocating storage of the system and fragmentation. Now we are going to start a file system construct and function. That's here that file system basically usually have the reserved location. जब आप डाटा एक्सेस करते हैं कुछ एक फाइल सिस्टम की ऑलरेडी कुछ रिजर्व्ड होती हैं लोकेशंस. दैट स्टोरेज एड्रेस स्पेस इज़ टू कीप इंटरनल इन्फॉर्मेशन अबाउट देयर ऑपरेशन, जिसके अंदर वो अपनी इंटरनल जो इन्फॉर्मेशन होती है फाइल से रिलेटेड, जो हम ऑपरेशंस को अप्लाई करते हैं, जो उनकी कॉन्फ़िगरेशन है, ये स्टेटस है, ये सब इन्फॉर्मेशन के लिए वो उस मेमोरी को ऑक्यूपाई करते हैं. And this that is reserved location is called the super block, that is in the Unix file system, and the master file table in Windows Server file system. And this is always fixed in this kind of the system. And this about super block. What is super block? बेसिकली अ फाइल सिस्टम जो यूजली सर्वर जो आपको लोकेशन प्रोवाइड करती है फॉर स्टोरेज के लिए, that is will be internal information of their operation, configuration and status. This basically reserved location is called super block in Unix file system and master file table in Windows Server file system, because these are the basic example in which we can refer you in the Unix and the Windows Server file system. Next about the namespace. namespace क्या है? इससे जो फाइल सिस्टम जो आप क्रिएट करते हैं, जो स्पेस एक आपको प्रोवाइड होती है, दैट अ मेथड फॉर इंटरप्रेटिंग एंड डिस्प्लेइंग फाइल एंड डायरेक्टरी इंफॉर्मेशन टू एंड यूजर एंड एप्लीकेशंस. Some of the major usability that differences between different file system and the result from having different namespace implementation. So, and for instance, like you have the different namespace might be can be treated as like the upper case हो सकते हैं, lower case में हो सकते हैं, character ये सब आपके जिस केस में आप चाहे डाल सकते हैं, and can have the different reserved character that allow different number of characters. And the next is about metadata and the attributes. Metadata and attribute that as a file, the file system that hold an increasing amount of data, so it is essential that mechanism that is to be found help to manage data in the meaningful way. So the main file system facility for supporting data management is metadata. metadata एक descriptive information आपको retain करती है by the file system, and that describe inherent characteristics, control information or usage or history of a file. And about there is traditional metadata that has been implemented as a file system attribute that indicate such thing as the size of a file, various date and timestamp for when the file were created, that opened and modified. And whenever the file need backing up, metadata normally is used by system or data management function like backup process. Means that this metadata आपको normally kind of user system डाटा को मैनेजमेंट फंक्शंस प्रोवाइड करता है, जैसे कि बैकअप है, प्रोसेसिंग हो रही है, एंड ऑल दिस काइंड ऑफ एट्रीब्यूट्स, दिस काइंड ऑफ हैंडल इन द मेटाडाटा दैट कंटेन इंफॉर्मेशन अबाउट द डाटा. Access permission. Access permission is what the like file system usually have some form of access permission होती है. जैसे कि आपको कोई फाइल है उसको पर्टिकुलर यूजर्स खोल सकते हैं बट कुछ यूजर्स नहीं खोल सकते. मीन्स देयर आर सम ऑथराइजेशन फॉर पर्टिकुलर यूजर्स, सो दैट डिटरमाइन व्हाट डाटा डिफरेंट यूजर एंड एप्लीकेशन कैन एक्सेस. And can as user attempt to open file, their IDs are checked against the security data associated with the file. If user is authorized to work with the file, so he can gain appropriate level of access. आपको किस लेवल तक सिक्योर आपको ऑथराइजेशन प्रोवाइड किया है, क्या आप डाटा को सिर्फ रीड कर सकते हैं या फिर रीड एंड राइट दोनों कर सकते हैं, या उसके अंदर आप मॉडिफिकेशन कर रहे हैं एंड मे बी एडेड सम मोर थिंग. As there are many, basically on the some level cases you can make access permission to the user, so it is possible to keep file from the being updated or reviewed that way. Interface semantic basic, that is access control. एंड एक्सेस कंट्रोल वो आपको क्या करता है, प्रोवाइड करता है, जिसमें हमारी जो फाइल सिस्टम होती है एंड दैट फाइल सिस्टम एप्लीकेशन इंटरफेस होता है यूजिंग फाइल सिस्टम सीमेंटिंग. That semantic of file system describe methods by which data is exchanged between application and file system. आप application के थ्रू file system के बीच में कुछ changes exchange कर सकते हैं and that can include control over which user or application get to work with data. That is means some system that can include control. आपके पूरे सिस्टम में ओवर कंट्रोल मिलता है यूज़र को और एप्लीकेशन को, जिसके थ्रू आप अपने डाटा के साथ वर्क कर सकते हैं. सो इंटरफेस बेसिकली द टर्म दैट इज इन बिटवीन ऑफ द अदर टू. So that is access control that can control provide through the file system application, and that is semantic basically जिसकी वजह से आप describe कर सकते हो, method कर सकते हो. For example, basically let's see a file system may have several options for opening files that can be used by application the vendor for a number of reasons. You can say the his semantics, the open with denied right or open with deny open, that can be used when first opening a file to ensure that other worker or application process cannot interface with work being done by the person or application that opened it initially. So this is the way you may have seen a message telling you that you cannot access a certain file because another user is working on it. Locking is a basic mechanism that allow file system to support exclusive or prioritize access to a file. आप अपने फाइल को अगर लॉक करते हैं तो इससे आपके फाइल्स में जो डाटा होता है वो सिक्योर होता है. दैट कैन बी एक्सेस बाय पर्टिकुलर्स who know about the authorization. And locking allow first user to finish work basically and the file that without risking interface from the other user of application. जैसे कि एग्जांपल, आपकी एक फ़ाइल है और एक फ़ाइल पे मल्टी यूज़र उस डाटा को एक्सेस करना चाहते हैं, तो दैट इज़ बेसिकली कॉन्सिक्वेंसी कंट्रोल प्रॉब्लम अराइज हो जाती है. तो उस केस में लॉकिंग क्या होता है, जब तक एक यूज़र फाइल में अपडेट्स नहीं कर लेता तब तक वो दूसरे को परमिशन ग्रांट नहीं करता. तो till when the person is doing access file, till at that time period will be locking the file, because on that same time no other person will allowed to make modification in the file. So that is illustration that processing section. Locking is a mechanism that allow file system to support exclusive prioritized access. जो भी prioritize है उसके according वो access करता है. Locking allow करती है first user को to finish working on a file without risking interface. But locking basically not necessarily done on the same on every file, and there are significant difference basically in locking mechanism that used on Unix and Windows system. File system buffer and cache. File system buffer basically the memory में हम जो भी input output operations करते हैं that are approximately 5 to 6 orders में होते हैं of magnitude faster than the input output. That consider that file system जो हमारी performance है that has the major impact on overall system performance. It is not surprising that file system load part of their data in memory and to provide performance. आपको कितना परफॉर्मेंस कैसे प्रोवाइड कर रही है. फाइल सिस्टम ऑल्सो कीप एप्लीकेशन डाटा इन मेमोरी बफर टू इम्प्रूव परफॉर्मेंस. इन एसेंस दिस इज इक्विवेलेंट टू कैचिंग बट इज डन बाय द फाइल सिस्टम. बेसिकली ये हमारा इक्विवेलेंट है लाइक कैचिंग की तरह, बट ये इससे हम फाइल सिस्टम के थ्रू करते हैं which has detailed information about all storage address where file is stored. Unlike base block based coaching, that which has no file or directory context. To work from the file system, catching has 100% accuracy is the very necessary here. File system checking and journalism, that is basically requirement is to maintain file system, that consistency between stored file data and the file system reference system is normally dealt with in one of two way. That can be first the file system consistency checking, and the second you can say journaling. In general, file system consistency is a problem only when the normal abnormal system stop occur due to the such unexpected occurrence as a sudden loss of power, a natural disaster, or you can say an operating system bug. Most of the file systems have information in the super block that indicate if the file system followed in an orderly net shutdown, maintaining file system consistency. So when a file system start, it read the super block to determine if an orderly shutdown in the process occurred. So if didn't, data consistency is at a risk. Let's see here. दिस इज द फाइल सिस्टम रेफरेंस दैट कंटेन इन्फॉर्मेशन हो सकती है, डुप्लीकेशन रिडेंडेंसी हो सकती है, उसको रिमूव करना होता है, एंड दिस रिडंडेंट इन डिफरेंस सिस्टम स्ट्रक्चर एंड प्रोसेस कॉल्ड फाइल सिस्टम चेक दैट कैन डिटरमाइन वेदर सिस्टम कंसिस्टेंट है या डुप्लीकेट है या लॉस्ट है, दैट करेक्ट द प्रॉब्लम टू रीस्टोर फाइल सिस्टम टू यूजेबल स्टेट. Scaling file system. Scaling file system is the one of main problem administrator that face is storage scalability. Data की storing scalability check करता है when file system is reach a certain threshold of file filled capacity, then they tend to become fragmented and perform poorly. अगर वो हमारे थ्रेशोल्ड कैपेसिटी के रीच तक पहुंच जाते हैं तो उनकी परफॉर्मेंस पुअर हो जाती है, एंड दोज थ्रेशोल्ड डिपेंड ऑन अ नंबर ऑफ वेरिएबल that include the application and the particular file system used and the configuration of underlying storage. These are the point here about in the scaling. Basically copying file into the new file system, new storage is next here. आप कॉपी कर रहे हैं फाइल को एक नई फाइल में ऑन अ न्यू स्टोरेज पे. So that is the one way to increase size of file system is to copy the content to a new larger storage address space, and this is fairly straightforward approach basically that has side benefit for of determining that file has as it is being written to its new location. Although it might not be seem obvious, so this process actually creates a new file system that manage the allocation of new larger storage address space for existing files. So that can be cut over process can be performed manually or be the can accomplished by the product that automate the process, because manual process disrupt system and application process. Automated data migration product may be well worth with their cost. So next is about the file system expansion. When a file system is created, it establishes an internal structure, reference system, so the fit of the size of storage address space. Unless special processes are run, so there is no way for the file system to know that storage address space it manages may have been increased, and some file system may include this process and can expand their boundaries. To accommodate this increases in the storage space, they currently can be managed. And next is the fundamental of network file system. In the network file system that introduced in the 1985 by the Sun Microsoft with the network of file system that allowed team of user working on Sun of the Unix and workstation that exchange data over LAN without having to use removable storage disk or tape. In fact, you can say NFS network file system allowed system to be made and that had no local storage whatsoever, and so by allowing system as to load the operating system over a network. Network file system was an immediate success and was quickly adopted throughout the Unix industry and standard for storing and sharing file. Today, NFS network file system is the one of the oldest and the most widely used standard in network storage. And more about this is the diagram on the network file system. You can see here there is the client system and it is connected with the server system. The client create and modify the data through the server data store where on the server system. You can see in this diagram connection is made between client and server. Client make modify data which is stored over the server. Network file system client can that role function of the client in network file system should not be underestimated. While most of the storage function are determined by file server software and function of server need to match the capabilities and usage method of the client system. You can say economic pressure to reduce cost on client machine, and it can be used client software that can ship with the operating system and have significantly influence like client server relationship where client request send करता है and the servers accept the and response of the client request if that is to be appropriate according to that. And next is we are going to discuss about the remote mounting and the network file system. द रिमोट माउंटिंग नेटवर्क फाइल सिस्टम के अंदर आपको जो प्रोसेस होता है इसके अंदर जो प्रोसेस ऑफ द क्लाइंट जो इनपुट आउटपुट हमारे डायरेक्टेट करता है फाइल्स को कहाँ से इनपुट है आउटपुट है कम्युनिकेट करता है बिटवीन फाइल सिस्टम में दैट इज़ द रिमोट माउंट एंड द रिमोट माउंट प्रोसेस यूजली इंक्लूड सम टाइप ऑफ नेटवर्क लॉगिन दैट login ensure that person is authenticate for network file or not. That here the term originate from mount process that is used by file system and operating system to ensure that two are ready for work together within the individual system. File server system here the network file system are practically basically synchronous होती है that file server system may be hardware and file serving can place to considerable load on the system particularly in the input output and storage component. So the network file system software is typically installed by heavy duty like system design करना extend करना reliability and larger storage capacities that are the better of the input output performance. File server software that over the network filling service. Here the file server software typically run on server system as tightly integrated application on the common operating system. There the window like Unix and the Linux desktop system can be converted into file server with like addition of the file server software. Unix and Linux operating system typically comes with the optional like network file system software, and while Microsoft Windows like server software is an additional software package that upgrades a desktop system to become a सर्वर. ये एक लिनक्स लाइस के अंदर एक ऐसा ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम है जो आपकी नेटवर्क फाइल सिस्टम को हमारे माइक्रोसॉफ्ट विंडो के थ्रू अपडेट करता रहता है उनके पैकेज को एंड अबाउट द क्लाइंट सर्वर. Here the server file system that client file and server file system may be different. You know the client this side and server side may be different and can be create the problems. Here application जो होता है हम write करते हैं for particular operating system के according and platform that is assume the native for the file system. And how if the server file system does not support then and the same metadata does not support then assume that maybe client application could be incorrect. This is the exercise that you can try it by yourself is the what do you mean by the server system and explain the use of namespace. This is all about today's session. We are winding up here. Thank you so much. Happy learning. We learn.